Why are scientists so hostile to rational and logical thinking? They deny that reality is rational and instead claim that it is empirical. They deny that reason and logic can establish the nature of reality. They instead claims that knowledge can only be accumulated via the limited, fallible, unreliable, delusional human senses, even though Descartes, a rationalist, cast absolute doubt on these centuries ago and showed how they could never be the basis of absolute, certain knowledge. Mathematics, by contrast, can be and is. The hilariously named Bacon Sizzle said, "I don't think you really understand what you are talking about. You are just spitting out big words. If you'd actually take the time to do research, I'm sure you would find that the laws of physics are not what you believe them to be. As for science, it's not a cult. Science is simply observing the world around us and coming to a conclusion on how it works. If it were a cult, the answers would never change. That's what separates science and religion. Religion's facts are based on belief, whereas science's facts are based on years of observation, experimentation, and challenging the outcome. We are always learning because of science. Why do you seem to hate it so much? Seeing as if it weren't for science you wouldn't be able to make this video." Well, Bacon Sizzle, you obviously didn't take the trouble to research any of the big words, i.e., you projected onto us your own failing, your own crime, your own defect. You plainly had no clue what any of them meant, hence you self-evidently couldn't grasp the point being made. This happens all of the time with worshippers of the cult of scientism. They cannot define anything, and they are philosophically illiterate. They have no idea what science actually is. If these people took the time to do research, they would realize how different science is from what they imagine. Their first port of call should be Thomas Kuhn's brilliant study The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. Wikipedia says, Kuhn made several notable claims concerning the progress of scientific knowledge, that scientific fields undergo periodic, paradigm shifts, rather than solely progressing in a linear and continuous way, and that these paradigm shifts open up new approaches to understanding what scientists would never have considered valid before, and that the notion of scientific truth, at any given moment, cannot be established solely by objective criteria but is defined by a consensus of a subjective, scientific community. Competing paradigms are frequently incommensurable, that is, they are competing and irreconcilable accounts of reality. Thus, our comprehension of science can never rely wholly upon objectivity alone. Science is emphatically not simply observing the world around us and coming to a conclusion on how it works. It is systematically applying an unsupported, unprovable ideology, exactly as religion does. It interprets every result via a particular interpretive framework, paradigm, and dismisses all alternative, and much more rational, interpretive frameworks. It is therefore a classic cult, and people such as Bacon Sizzle come across exactly as weird and zealous cultists, unable to change their fixed, conditioned view of reality. These people need to be deprogrammed. If it were a cult, the answers would never change, says Bacon Sizzle. So, Mr. Sizzle, when has scientism ever reached any conclusion that contradicts empiricism and materialism? When has it ever proved that empiricism and materialism are true, and rationalism and idealism false? Since it never has and never could, and doesn't even attempt to try, it is a ferocious anti-intellectual cult and faith system. Scientism rejects rationalism, logic, the principle of sufficient reason and Occam's razor, and labels mathematics as an unreal, man-made abstraction. Like Martin Luther, it basically calls reason the devil's whore and claims that we should always accept the evidence of our limited, unreliable, flawed, delusional human senses in preference to the dictates of reason and logic, which always lead to strictly mathematical conclusions. In what way then is scientism not a cult of irrationalism? Science and religion are not separate. Both are belief systems that refuse to subject themselves to any analytic, rational, logical scrutiny, and which refuse to ever doubt their fanatical paradigm, which they never challenge under any circumstances. Scientific facts are always based on interpretation. As Nietzsche said, there are no facts, only interpretations. Science's facts are not based on years of observation, experimentation and challenging the outcome. They are based on the uncontested ideology of empiricism and materialism, through which 100% of scientific conclusions are mediated. No scientist would stay in a job if he promoted any view incompatible with empiricism and materialism, the truth of which has never once been proved, which simply demonstrates that scientism is a cult. Bacon Sizzle says, "We are always learning because of science. Any religious worshipper can say exactly the same. A Christian is always learning every time he reads the Bible. The issue is the legitimacy of what is being learned, not the fact that learning is occurring. People learn hopeless nonsense all the time." Bacon Sizzle asks, "Why do you seem to hate science so much? Seeing as if it weren't for science you wouldn't be able to make this video. We hate the cult of unreason. Anything that opposes the principle of sufficient reason and the ontology of mathematics. And it is mathematics, not science, that is responsible for the video. If you removed mathematics from science, science would be 100% worthless and there would be no videos, which tells any rational person that mathematics, not science, reveals to us what reality is. Scientism, the cult of irrationalism, blocks and subverts the truth and produces closed-minded, brainwashed muppets like Bacon Sizzle. He lashes out, like any person of faith, against anything that shakes his pathetic little belief system in the absurd human senses." Bacon Sizzle says, "Cult of scientism. How could you call science a cult? Easy, by observing your cultic behavior and bizarre, irrational arguments that 100% of the time miss and avoid the point. You literally have zero philosophical literacy and don't even comprehend what is being asserted. You are a Dunning-Kruger cultist. You are so ignorant of philosophy that you have no clue just how ignorant you are, and you have exactly zero intention of studying philosophy. Which proves that you belong to a blind cult." Bacon Sizzle quoted an article, "There are 4 major concepts in science: facts, hypotheses, laws, and theories," Coppinger told Live Science. Laws are descriptions, often mathematical descriptions, of natural phenomenon. For example, Newton's law of gravity or Mendel's law of independent assortment. These laws simply describe the observation. Read. Yes, why don't you read? Take your own advice. Since you have appealed to authority, so shall we. We have written millions of words on this subject. When have you read any of our material? Not once. So, like all cultists, you're a supposed expert on material of which you are provably 100% ignorant. Your problem is that we know exactly what claims scientists make, but you have absolutely no idea what our position is beyond what you have gleaned from this and that. Who's at a disadvantage? You or us? Shall we put up our knowledge against your ignorance? Who will win? Duh. Hilariously, Bacon Sizzle deliberately omitted Coppinger's devastating conclusion. Coppinger actually said, "These laws simply describe the observation, not how or why they work." Which is our whole fecking point, you dumbass. A system that by its own admission has no clue of how or why it works is not a system of truth, reason, or explanation, but a set of empirical, heuristic conjectures and speculations that only cultists such as Bacon Sizzle could find remotely convincing. We don't. We are rationalists who pursue reason and logic, not wild speculations flowing from the notoriously suspect human senses. Elena Bradford said, "In general, a scientific law is the description of an observed phenomenon. It doesn't explain why the phenomenon exists or what causes it. So, which person looking for the truth of existence is going to look to scientific laws when they can't explain why a phenomenon exists, what causes it, and how the law itself exists? Did these laws exist before what they describe existed? If not, are laws made up on the hoof? Do they pop into existence out of nowhere like magic? How can anyone talk about things obeying laws if they don't know what laws are, what their ontology and epistemology is, what their origin is and their sufficient reason, and why anything obeys laws at all?" As ever, Science simply begs the question and totally avoids having to explain itself. Only the most simple-minded people on Earth find science's constant non-explanations convincing. Nietzsche wrote, "We say it is explanation, but it is only in description that we are in advance of the older stages of knowledge and science. We describe better, we explain just as little as our predecessors. It would take a miracle for someone as intellectually stunted as Bacon Sizzle to understand such a point. He mindlessly laps up everything his cult feeds to him. He swallows every whopper uncritically, never once stopping to ask how science can make any sense if it cannot explain why anything obeys laws. Why should laws be obeyed unless laws are built into the fiber and fabric of existence, which is our entire point, and can be explained only via the ontology of mathematics?" Bacon Sizzle, like any empiricist, is repulsed by the true nature of reality being accessible to reason and logic alone, i.e., rationalism, and not to the limited, superficial, interpretive human senses, by which he swears, like all good sensory cultists who can't get transcend the sensory delusion. You would think these people had never heard of Descartes' demolition of empiricism. Actually, none of these people has ever read the likes of Descartes, Plato, Berkeley and Leibniz. That's their whole problem. It's truly disturbing how philosophically illiterate worshippers of scientism are, and how much they believe whatever empiricists and materialists tell them, regardless of how irrational it is. And then, just like religious believers, they trot out all their silly little nostrums that supposedly prove the truth of science. It's just like coming across Christians quoting from the Christian Bible to prove the truth of Christianity. These people never once address the actual points raised, and simply regurgitate propaganda that has been refuted since forever. Extra scientiam nulla salus, they say, like the good little cultists they are. Even professional scientists know how dumb most armchair, wannabe scientists are, i.e., all the posturing clowns and poseurs that post comments on our work, none of whom has ever practiced science at any serious level and who therefore know nothing about the myriad doubts that real scientists express regarding the coherence of science. Carlo Rovelli wrote, "Reality is not what it seems." That's our exact point. Regardless of what your senses are telling you, reality is nothing like how it phenomenally appears to you. And unless you can understand the noumenal layer that underlies all phenomena and can inherently never be observed, you will never get anywhere near comprehending reality. Sadly, the followers of the cult of scientism will go on believing that the phenomenal, sensory world is the actual world. How backward can you get? They are the victims of naive realism, i.e., the human tendency to believe that we see the world around us objectively, that the senses provide us with direct awareness of objects as they really are, and that people who disagree must be uninformed, irrational, or biased. How pathetic that humans remain so primitive and bigoted. Humans, using their senses, once believed that the Earth was at the center of the universe, and many believed that the Earth was flat, an absurdity returning to vogue amongst an ever-growing number of empiricists who insist on the truth of what they literally see with their own eyes. It surely won't be long until Bacon Sizzle, a fanatical hater of reason and logic, joins the Flat Earth cult. It's vital that these cults of unreason are stopped. The sick hatred of rationalism must be defeated. The bizarre worship of the human senses has gone on for far too long. The senses are not organs of truth. You cannot look at anything at all and see its truth, what it really is. All you see is the unexplained surface. We are the people going beneath that surface, to what the entity actually is in itself. None of the followers of the cult of scientism will be coming with us. They are shallow people, stuck with appearances and phenomena, and totally clueless about what things really are when considered in the absence of the human senses. Humanity has only existed for a fraction of history. What was the reality of existence before humanity existed? You obviously cannot use the human senses, human observations, human experiences, and a human paradigmatic way of thinking to work that out. You can certainly use the eternal, necessary, a priori truths of reason and logic. The followers of the cult of scientism are way too stupid to grasp reason and logic, and to see that mathematics, the subject of reason and logic, is the truth of science, not science the truth of mathematics. Never forget, if you remove mathematics from science, science instantly becomes an outright religion and collapses as a serious subject. Scientists are all true believers, and the constant trolling of reason, logic and mathematics proves how irrational they are. Why are they so appalled by the concept of a mathematical universe? Even scientists such as Max Tegmark agree with the ultimate mathematical nature of reality, and Roger Penrose is not far off. Yet you never find all the dummies trolling them. The science fanboys are hypocrites and cultists, and, like all such people, they completely lack self-awareness. They hate us because they cannot refute us, and that infuriates them. What sort of clown imagines he can defeat mathematics using his pathetic human senses? No wonder flat earth theory is back. That's what happens when people believe sensory evidence, sensory facts, sensory common sense. Enough already. John Kenneth Galbraith said, "The real accomplishment of modern science and technology consists in taking ordinary men, informing them narrowly and deeply, and then, through appropriate organization, arranging to have their knowledge combined with that of other specialized but equally ordinary men. This dispenses with the need for genius. The resulting performance, though less inspiring, is far more predictable. This is the precise problem with science. It lacks geniuses. It is now conducted by very narrow functionaries and technicians, who have no general knowledge at all, and are 100% ignorant of philosophy and all the devastating critiques of science and its coherence that philosophy offers. Like any people of faith, science cultists and fanboys refuse to answer their critics. They never once doubt their beliefs, these ignorant zealots of irrationalism. Remember, their ultimate aim is to deny that mathematics is real. What is rational about that? Only if reality is mathematical does it have a rational answer. It certainly doesn't have a rational, logical answer if it is scientific.